Well, good afternoon. Good late afternoon, Tavis. How are you?
I am stressed today.
Yes, we're recording a late Friday. This last couple of weeks have just been different. I've been out of town. You've been out of town. Funeral stuff, live stuff. And it's great because we've got a lot of real estate things happening, both of us, and you more than me. But I've got a fair number of things. But it makes figuring out a time to record a little bit more difficult. So hopefully we'll have to get on our normal routine of recording Wednesday mornings and getting it out on a regular Friday morning. But last couple of weeks been a little tough. But why don't you catch everybody up? I know you sent me a video of I ran some comps for you for a new place, and then you sent me a video of another one. So tell us kind of what you got going on.
Yeah, so we might have talked about it a little bit last week, but we've got a couple projects going on. We got one in Garland that we're wrapping up. It's kind of a heavy tier 1 project, almost a tier 2. I mean, about $115,000 project going on that we're wrapping up. So lots of little details here at the end, and just this is where it's really important to know your timetables. And flooring, for instance, had to be scheduled 2 weeks prior, and so flooring's going in Monday, Tuesday, and so now it's like this week is get the electricians in and out. I don't like the electricians on the floors after. If you can get them done before, it's less traffic on the floors, less traffic on carpet. But back and forth a little bit between the trim guys, and the trim guys missed, and then the painters came, and so anyways, we've had a few things that we've had to pull an audible on. And then we closed on a property that I bought with the intention to flip it in the initial contract. So the numbers are good. And then talking to Tabitha, we decided to keep this property. And this is in the Colony. And we decided to keep it as a rental. And so we closed it Monday. I went over Monday evening, and their late teenage son was still in the house. And it was like half naked, and like look pure, can't say the word, but peeling around the corner, looking at me as I'm walking in the door with my key. And he's like, whoa, 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 whoa. I'm like, what are you doing, man?
Right.
He's like, oh, I was told I have till 7. I was like, okay. So you're going to be out of here by 7, because nobody told me anything. And he's like, yeah, man. Yeah, I'll be out by 7. So of course I called his parents. It was like, what's the deal? And they're like, for real? He's there? Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And so anyways, it's just, I get it completely, dealing with late teenage sons and not understanding urgency or timetables or respect, things of that sort. Like, what do you mean I have to really get out? What do you mean you sold the house? What do you mean it's not ours anymore? So apparently he had been living there on his own the last couple of months, I guess. So anyways, I haven't been back over there until today, and lined out the guys anyways to start paint work and, texture work and stuff like that. So today I stopped by and checked it, and did a quick video. And my main demo guy has been tied up on this big project in Richardson. And so if you look in the video, there's still like food in the pantry, and like, clothes on the floor, clothes in the closets, like all this stuff that was left behind that has not been. You
should have offered the real go-getter teenage son some money to just demo the place, and he knows it really well. I probably would have gone well.
I probably ended up, it'd be down to the studs then, right? And then the numbers would not work. So
only tear out the carpet, and you come back and you have to redo 3 bathrooms.
Oh gosh, you know how many times I've told demo guys that, like, only pull out the carpet, or only do this, or only pull the baseboards in the living room. And I come in and the entire house is stripped of baseboards and trim around the doors, and like everything's gone. I'm like, oh no.
Yep.
So anyways,
that's so it's happened to me, and I know it's happened to you since we've been working together. They ripped out a whole kitchen one time. Yeah, they weren't supposed to rip out the cabinets.
So lots of moving parts this week. Good stuff, right? All good stuff. I mean, we talked on the podcast not too long ago, and I said, five projects is pretty good. And, I got what I wished for. I've got 5 projects going right now. I got one closing.
You're big into speaking it into existence. So you spoke it into existence.
There you go, man. There you go. So, one closing next week that we're going to start. And then The one in Aubrey that we closed, was it end of last month, early this month? I can't remember now. That one, they've got a lease back going until the end of this month. So then I'll take possession on it. So
Well, let's talk about a few things here. So I think it's important. The reason that you kept the colony house is this was kind of a decision that you and Tabitha made a couple years ago. This was not, y'all don't analyze every deal and say, hey, should we keep this?
right.
But y'all had this conversation, and this goes towards an investment thesis. Y'all just have a general, and it's not super strict, but you have this general concept of, hey, if a house comes up in the colony, and y'all had sort of this geographic area,
Yep.
and I think it was based on regret of like, man, we should have done this a long time ago. But you said, if I ever run across a house that fits these criteria in this area, we're keeping it. You've like already made that decision, right? So that's kind of, this one fell into that category.
Yep. Yeah, no, for sure. And like I said, it's kind of when your brain is switch on to flip mode, right? And we've talked about this before, but flips are looked at like an annualized income, right? It realistically, we can call ourselves investors all day, and essentially, yes, we're investing in a property, we're renovating it, and we're selling it. We're investing and we're making profit, but it's more of like a job in a sense that when we're flipping a project, um, we're basically a builder, if you will, right? So we're buying the asset, we're renovating it, and then we're, rebuilding it and we're selling it, making a profit. And so, my goal every year is kind of figure out how many units that it's going to take to meet that annualized income goal, right? From an annualized goal point of business, just like you would in any other business, right? Your gross revenue. And so, as inventory's been low and as at bats and acquisitions have been low this year, or the beginning part, right? The first quarter was pretty slow. So as those things continue and it picks up, I mean, when I ran this, I ran the numbers and I'm like, man, this is a great flip, right? This gives out a really good return. So that was where my mind was flipped to add to the annual revenue bucket being essentially at the midpoint of the year, right? We just started third quarter, sorry. And so with that mentality, I'm thinking, okay, cool. I'm meeting these goals for this annual number. And essentially having the conversation with my wife, she's like, hey, we got one in the colony. We always said, we get one in the colony, we need to keep it. So the numbers actually work out pretty well. I mean, where I bought it and what the rental numbers, at rent for, I mean, it's a 1,400 square foot home and the average rents over there are $2,350, right? For one that's been updated. So it's a pretty good number when you break it down that way. Now with interest rates and, the way that it's leveraged and stuff like that, it doesn't cash flow a lot, right? It's not a cash flow game, but it's that, it's that opportunity game, right? You look at it, it has multiple strategies, has multiple exit strategies. We're going to take this down and do a 12-month rental, but we could easily turn it into another midterm rental if we wanted to. With all of the growth and development going on in Frisco, again, this is a non-HOA area. I believe the colony does want you to register short-term rentals if you do that. But as far as I know, there's not restrictions right now. So, it has that option, right? You get into the short-term rental game with all this development going on in Frisco and Prosper, right? With, all these different events going on and things that we've talked about on the podcast here. So, so anyways, and you got that big spa. You got the big spa right now in
World Springs.
World Springs. It's literally 5 minutes from this property. So, I don't know how that works with anybody coming for like a destination point, if that's going to drive traffic. But in the meantime, we'll do what needs to be done to update it. It needs several deferred maintenance things. It's got an old Federal Pacific panel. It's got old AC system. It's pretty much original to the house. You got an old water heater. It's original house, but they had done some updates. So it has some vinyl windows. It had some nice LVP in there. The kitchen had actually some prefab cabinets that were done with granite countertops. And so it's got some things done that are nice from the cosmetic side. We're just going in now and kind of like dealing with, mechanical and infrastructure stuff as well.
Yeah.
So
So let's talk about this too. So I know you said at the beginning of the year and you said, I'm going to be flip heavy. Last couple of years, you've passed on some stuff. You've been more wholesale heavy. You've been keeping some stuff. You did a commercial building that you wanted to, that was kind of one of your goals. But this year you said you really needed to be more flip heavy. And so what do you think has changed? Do you think the market has helped you where there's other investors, it's not as much competition, and so your numbers are going through? Or have you just, your mentality shift is just you're seeing deals differently? Like how did you just make that switch, and then all of a sudden you've got 5 deals that it's like, I'm as busy as I want to be?
yeah.
Do you think, kind of walk through that?
So to wholesale, obviously wholesale, you've got to buy the property deep enough to where there's enough of a margin for the opportunity, but there's also still enough skin in it for the end user buyer investor to make money too, right?
Yeah, that's a
And
knowledgeable wholesaler. That's how they operate. A lot of
yes,
wholesalers don't operate that way. We've talked about that.
well, and
But
that's why
how you operate it.
that's why you're seeing a shitstorm out there right now on social media, right? So I guess to my point, and it actually started early last year, early January of 2023. I had an opportunity in Plano. They flaked on me about 2 weeks before closing, and we had to scramble and figure out what the heck is going on. And basically, the lender was backing out, or the lender went bankrupt. I don't know. It was a mess.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I teed up my bank, and we were able to close it. I was just a little short on the cash that I needed, not necessarily to take it down, but cash to float the reno. And I had everything teed up and approved with my bank. And I should have just taken it down, is what I should have done, because it would have helped with last year's gross revenue, because
Mm-hmm.
I was set to make potentially 90 to 100K on this property in Plano.
Mm.
And instead, I kind of scrambled and made the wholesale deal work, but rather than me make like 32 grand on the wholesale deal, I had to give up 12 grand in basically the 11th hour to get these people to close. Like, because they were basically just like, hey, we can't close, our terms changed, yada, yada, yada. And it went from 2 week, like kind of a 2 week notice, everything's good, but it's kind of wonky. Okay, cool. I teed up my bank, and then everything's back on track. And a week before closing, everything's great. Everything's cool. Literally 72 hours before closing, it's not cool, right?
Yeah.
It's going to blow up. It's not going to happen. So now I'm getting egg on my face with the lead. I'm getting my egg on my face with the seller. And, so I had to do what I had to do to make it work with that buyer. And so I had to give up some money to make it work. And then the unfortunate part is I laid this floor plan out for these guys, because it was kind of a funky floor plan. They were calling it a 4-bedroom, but technically one of the bedrooms, and you guys have probably seen this floor plan before. There was an atrium in the middle of the house, and the 4th bedroom technically opened egress was going to a courtyard, right? Or going to an atrium. It wasn't technically, it didn't have a window, an outside window. And so it's kind of hard to still call it a 4-bedroom, right? And I laid this thing out to make it work and still be able to call it a 4-bedroom, and kind of laid out the floor plan for these people based on what I was going to do. And I don't know why I spent the time, but I think I want to see somebody else succeed when I do that.
Yeah.
And so I even went over to the property and I gave the guy the blueprints that I drew out and was like, hey, this is what I would do. And he didn't follow those plans. He didn't do that. He did it his way. And he added, there was a bar area, and he made it into a full bath. Okay. There's no purpose of that full bath where it is. They added a shower in a bar area, took out the bar, and there was a half bath there, but there was a bar adjacent to it. He made it a full bath with a shower. Well, first off, there's no pool to this house. So what are you going to use it for? And there's no bedroom on that side of the house. So what do you need a full bath and a shower over there for? Are you going to get dressed in the dining room? Like it made no sense at all. And unfortunately, it took the dude almost a year maybe over a year to get the project done and get it on the market. And then they priced it too high. And last time I looked, it was still on the market, and they had done major price reductions. So it was disappointing, and it was frustrating because even the seller I kind of knew, and in the past, and it was the seller's parents' house, and she's like, I'm so excited to see this project get done, and it's like a flop.
Yeah, right.
So it was upsetting. But anyways, that put it in my brain a year ago. Like, okay, is this the time when I'm starting to see where margins are lower on wholesaling, and if you have a bird in the hand to flip it, you need to flip it. So I started kind of seeing that trend last year, and then I think the writing was on the wall for me with the Wiley deal. You remember that whole deal? It blew up in December, and buyer decided they were going to back out in the 11th hour, and then try to circumvent everybody. And literally, I was only going to make like 10 grand on that deal. So I'm glad that it worked the way it did, and I was able to jump on board and get it, and take it down and actually purchase it and flip it. And I did really well on that project. I think we made, right at 100K on it. So it just, that light switch goes off, and you're like, okay, I was going to make 10% of what I made,
right.
By
you would have to do 10 deals like that.
Exactly. So I think that was a big switch for me. And since then, I'm hearing more and more of these stories. I mean, like there was a guy yesterday that I highly respect that was on, the big DFW investor page, and they were so upset because they have a property they're wholesaling, and they put it out there and got a buyer, with no option period, and expected this buyer to be the end user and be the flipper, right? That's buying the property. Mm-hmm. And, in the 11th hour, they don't close and they back out, and they're basically like, who cares about your contract? And it was all because they were trying to wholesale a deal. So it was a double wholesale, right? They were trying to daisy chain the deal. So I think there's a crap ton of people still on the market that are just trying to make crap work because they were so used to wholesaling and making 10 to 20K a month. And, these deals aren't happening now. They're not getting the at-bats. They're not getting the opportunity. So now they're trying to just daisy chain a deal to make it work. And they don't have the capital to flip. They don't have the experience to flip. Mm-hmm. And so we're starting to see that right now in the market quite a bit. So,
I think a lot of it's because there's a lot of training out there for agent outreach, like what you do, but you have a relationship with agents. But if you're just a guy who buys a course and learns how to reach out to agents and put something under contract, and a lot of times they do this from a distance. Dallas is a very popular market to invest in from a distance. And so you'll have someone that sits in Atlanta and shoots out. I mean, I follow a guy on Instagram. He puts out 20 to 25 offers a day. He has a program that helps him do quick offers. It's all out on market, just like this, MLS, and, ties stuff up. And then he tries to put it onto his sellers or to his end buyers. But if you're not in the market, you don't really know. You're only going off of just text and call. You don't have any relationship with people. So I can't, I'm sure some people make it work out, but it looks easy and really fun, especially if you land a big deal early on. But I just know that there's a big market for that education of, hey, you can do this anywhere. You can wholesale from a distance. This is how you do it. Here's how you can make quick offers. And it's going to make a mess of things. So, but anyway, I'm proud of that. You've kicked it up a notch. I mean, it's impressive to see. I need to get back in the game. We're slowly trying to sell the Sweetwater house. That should be coming to an end, hopefully within 30 days. So that we'll once we free up that money, the investors' money, I think we're going to be actively looking for a flip. So maybe by the end of the year we can get into something and figure that out, which would be amazing. On my end, I have a listing that's under contract. I had a really interesting thing. First time ever, I had my title company that I used, Capital, great company, big company, a lot of different offices. And they kicked back this property and said, we can't issue a title policy on it. And title is basically an insurance policy. I don't know all the details. We need to have a title person on. If Michael can ever figure out his computer, we'll have him on. But, we need, title is at the end of the day is an insurance policy to sort of ensure that this transaction is going to go smoothly for a long time. And so they issue these policies with the underwriting of, okay, what are the basics of the purchase? Well, turns out part of this purchase, the loan, it's really convoluted. It's tied into Choctaw Nation, and it's an assignment deal where my seller, the buyers that have put a contract on the house, they put a contract on the house with the basics of an FHA loan. Then they're assigning it to Choctaw Nation. Choctaw Nation is turning back around and putting them under contract as lease to own people.
What in the world?
And it's so weird. And so Capital, I guess Choctaw Nation, they operate under their own legal system in a lot of ways.
And this is your Princeton deal.
Yeah, Princeton.
Wow.
They operate under Choctaw Nation rules. And so Capital Title and a lot of underwriters are saying, look, if anything ever went to court, we need to operate under US law. And they won't sign off on that. They won't agree to, hey, we're going to forego our sovereign ability to govern ourselves in this matter. And that's my understanding. And that's why these underwriters will say, look, we just can't touch this, because if this ever went to court, we can't adjudicate it, And anyway, so it got kicked out. But the lender who's done this loan, it's a new loan program, says, hey, we have a title company that's closed a handful of these for us. They know exactly how to do it, what the moving parts are. They're comfortable with it. So it switched over. And so it may add a few days to the end of closing, but supposedly everything is still, fundamentals are there and it's going to work out fine. And my seller understands, but yeah, it's a weird little glitch that I never even knew was a thing. But I guess there's loan programs out there that you have no idea about that, are there to kind of help certain populations of people, and some low income, some people from different, they have this qualification or that qualification. It's like, man, I have no idea. I'm used to the 30-year fix. That's do I do a 30-year, a 15-year, 20-year, the ARM or fix? That's kind of as complicated as I get. But yeah, we got that going, and we're still trying to get the Keller house ready to go. They've talked to some state sale companies, and we're getting closer and closer. They actually might do a buy before you sell loan. So that'll be an interesting process to watch. I've heard a lot about those products, but they might buy a house and then sell theirs. And so that's kind of a bridge loan program. So yeah, it's kind of a fun little education in title work and mortgages over the last few weeks. So, well, why don't we get, it is always something. Let's get into a quick market update. So the market is similar in that it's locked up, and it's making more and more national news. And I think we're going to see this the closer we get to the election, and all these debates. And now it's this political issue, and inflation, of course, is coming up. And is the economy good? Is the economy bad? And a large part of that is housing. And so the housing market is going to make its way into national news. And last week we talked about how one analyst said that he predicts a housing crash. It was sort of the Gulf states. When he read about it, it was more of a pullback, not really a crash. But it is looking like things are just really stacking up. And month over month, the closed transactions are down. Year over year, they're down. And the inventory is up. And, the Dallas market month supply right now, we are on average 3.6 month supply. If we're looking at year over year, June here, 3.6. Again, 6 months they say is balance. I'm sure if I stick in this game long enough, I will see a 6 month supply.
Yeah.
However, I'm starting
to see some homes that I would expect to kind of go a little faster, and
they're just not,
and they haven't yet. So I don't know. Yeah. It's kind of weird. So
yeah, but that's what I'm saying. To me, it almost already feels like a buyer's market, because sellers are paying for closing. We're coming off of price pretty regularly. Things are lingering more. And so maybe when there's an actual buyer's market, is the average days on market 180 days? Is it 100 days? Is that something that you remember when there was a legit buyer's market, let's say a 6-month supply, do you remember how
Yeah.
long it would take to sell a house? Is it 3 months, 4 months, something like
Yeah,
that?
I mean, I remember representing buyers back in the day, and I mean, my first 5 years of real estate was, working with traditional buyers and sellers. And I remember, like selling a house was more of the issue. Buying a house was not a problem, right? It was like,
Yeah.
we can find you something, right? But
Right.
the challenge is selling your house. And and back then that's how it was. And it was more about like, how do we narrow this list down? And even I remember 2010, 11, 12, and that time frame too, having conversations with some agents out of our DPR office and helping show them how to narrow the list down, like with your buyers, because the traditional agent and still today, I think people run the risk of this. Now, the biggest challenge you have now is Zillow. I had a conversation yesterday with a traditional buyer, and I was looking on MLS and having a conversation with him, and he's like, "Oh, are you on Zillow? Like on Zillow, blah 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 blah." I'm like, "No, I'm in the MLS. Like I'm
Right.
in my system, like
Yeah.
I'm in my actual system here. I'm not in Zillow." And breaking it down, but I mean, it's become such an easy thing for people to do from their phone and from wherever. And back in the day, you didn't have that. And the challenge used to be like, I only want to show you 5 properties at a time because that's all you're going to be able to retain in a day.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But even more so, I would be very strict on sending those opportunities to clients, because if I sent them a list of 20 homes on MLS, it was very possible they'd come back and go, "We want to see all of them." And you're
Right.
like, "Oh, geez,"
Yeah.
like we need to pick the A properties, right? Like the A out of these
Right.
20, and how many A's are there really that meet all of your criteria and, are fairly new on the market and, hit all the boxes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like we need to go look at those A's, right? And then we'll regroup, right? Because you can only do so much online. Like I still think, there was
Yeah.
conversation for a long time about the internet's taken over, and there's going to be a buy button. And even for an investor, like I can get pretty close to knowing what I need to do and what my strike price is, but there's a buffer there, right? I mean, there's still like I still feel like I need to walk that property and really get a better feel of it, because there's
Yeah.
things that pictures are just not going to show me.
Yeah.
And there's things that are easily missed, right? In that point, right? So
Well, and you walk in the backyard and you realize there's power lines, or there's just a weird factor, or there's just all sorts
exactly.
of stuff you can't really. I mean, you can get close, but it is way better to be there. As far as the market goes, as a matter of fact, my neighbor, their house has fallen out twice. It's been on the market 20 20 days,
Oh
not
wow.
not not long, but it's actually. And the only reason I know is I don't look at it
Oh,
every
so they went
day.
under contract twice, is what you're saying?
Yeah, because they put an under contract little rider on the sign.
Yep.
And so,
Yeah.
so I know it's like, oh, under contract. Okay, yeah, here we go. Then they took it back down, new listing. I'm like, oh man. Then here it goes again, under contract. I'm like, all right. And literally the next day, I was like, did it fall off? I really thought, man, the wind must have taken that under contract sign.
Wow.
Nope, it fell out again.
Oh
So I need
gosh.
to go talk to my neighbor and just ask what what's going on and see. I don't know. I mean, it's a newish house, 2015, beautiful backyard. That one of these couples that work in the yard a lot and really take care of things. I can't imagine that the house needs much work at all. So I don't know. I mean, it's an odd deal. So I need to go track them down. But yeah, the market is stacking up, and inventory is getting there. Houses are turning over less, and we're in the summer. This is supposed to be one of the hot times, and so if we get into the school year, when things slow down a little bit, when people get real busy with school, and then we get into the holidays, a little bit different. It might be interesting. That being said, is Fed meets late July, I think July 31st. It's expected that they're going to keep rates stable, but you never know. Of course, we're coming into an election time, and I think that will play a factor in, not that Joe Biden can call up and say, hey, lower the rates, but I just do think that there is some pressure to boost the economy and try to make things look good going into an election year. So there's no real knowing exactly how that will play out. Well, why don't we get into a little bit of news? And the speaking of Joe Biden, we will talk about him because I think that's a really good topic. But I wanted to talk about a few things locally. At one point, we mentioned Alamo Drafthouse. That is a movie theater chain. I'm not sure where it was started, maybe Austin, but the first one I remember going to is Austin. It's just real funky type movie theater. They were closing down all of them here in Dallas. There was 5 of them. It was the first time I remember you could order food at a movie theater, and it just has this real eclectic feel. Well, they closed them down. They let people go. And then a few weeks later, Sony Pictures came in and said, actually, we're going to buy them. And this article came out this week is that Sony has reopened all of them. They made everybody whole. They kind of made up back pay. I mean, it seems like they did it right by everyone who worked at Alamo. And I'm just really glad that those are sticking around. One reason is there was another theater. Like, what do you do with these theaters that go vacant? Because there was another one near us called the Venetian. And
yeah.
do you remember that?
Yeah.
It was over in Carrollton.
Yeah.
And I think it was a mainstream theater. And then it went sort of dollar theater-ish. And then it went an interesting direction where it was mostly Bollywood, sort of other language films.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know the breadth of what they showed, but it was, I wasn't going there to watch the latest, Dune movie. But then that went out, and it sat vacant for a long time. I'm like, man, that'd be such a cool project and do a neat theater and all that. Well, it turned into an office sharing space, or office share. And so I'm like, did they level it out? Because they got all these sloped theaters. I wanted to walk through it just to see how they renovated a theater to make it right, because that is a very unique use case. So, but all these Alamo Drafthouses, I thought, man, this is gonna suck. They're just gonna sit there, and they're kind of a unique space. They don't have the 14 screens and what was the one over there in Plano at Legacy? What was that artsy one that? Did you ever go to that one?
No, I never did. Was that the Angelica? Yeah.
I went there a couple times, and I actually went there for a meeting, and it was neat as a meeting. They did a big presentation. They used the screen. Actually, that's funny. That was a real estate meeting where they were the very first time they were teaching on AI and ChatGPT. Mm-hmm. And it would be funny to go back and listen to that, because I'm sure it's like the most basic thing on how to write a prompt and all this stuff. But they gathered all these realtors in that room, and they made this big presentation, and it was like we're watching a spaceship take off. I was like, oh, no way. That's insane. But that was the last time I went to the Angelica, and evidently they did not book as many of those meetings as they should have, because it closed as well. So another name that popped up and I was curious if you knew about this. Are you familiar with the Garibaldi Bazaar?
No.
Garibaldi Bazaar. Evidently this is, it doesn't sound, to me, the name Garibaldi does not connote the Latino customer. It seems more Italian to me, but I'm ignorant. But evidently this is a kind of an indoor market, Latin market over in East Dallas, kind of over by White Rock Lake. And I think I passed it a few times when we were doing the flip over there on Mapleton. And it's I obviously haven't been there, but my understanding is it's just kind of this, there's tons of booths and stalls, and it's all sorts of Latin food and clothes and stuff. And it sounds like it'd be a lot of fun. And I guess people come in from a long way off to specifically go to this bazaar. And they think it may close. They think actually it may become a Home Depot. And that's kind of the space you can picture it might have been some sort of big box store at some point, a Sears, or I don't really know, but that's kind of the size. And they're thinking that there's a chance that, I guess Home Depot has applied for some sort of permit for that area or that spot, but they don't really own it. But they're fighting to kind of keep it around, because it seems like this real cultural hub. And it makes a lot of sense, because over there in Casa Linda, Casa View, where Mapleton was, that I fell in love with some of that area because especially there's some of the shopping centers that they had redone, real old school Latin, kind of 50s Latin vibe was really neat. And then there's just some really good taco spots, some carnicerias and all that stuff over there. Really, really love spending time in that area. So I hope this gets to stay around. And I was just curious if you had ever spent time at the Garibaldi Bazaar.
I have not ever been there.
We need to spend an afternoon there. We need to go. They sell quinceanera outfits. I'm sure you get invited to a lot of quinceaneras. So we need to go find you your next outfit. And,
there we go.
But yeah, looking at the pictures here, this place looks just absolutely covered up. So let's get to our last piece of news and our last item of discussion today. Speaking of Joe Biden, have you been keeping up at all about his announcement this last week as it pertains to landlords?
Yes.
So let's play the game. Good fiscal policy or nah? Do you think this is a good idea from the Biden administration? Let's talk about what it is. They have proposed, and I don't know that it's a proposal. I think if this is hey, this is going to happen. I may be misspeaking, but they have said they are pushing for an annual 5% rent increase cap on rents. The caveat is this is for people who own 50 units or more. So this is not for your mom and pop
right
shops. So 50 units, that's a lot, but it's also not this crazy number. It's not 1,000. So there's plenty of people, I'm sure, that we know that we could get in touch with in a few days that have 50 units. That's not that's not a portfolio made of unobtainium. It's definitely doable. And so the problem is everything I've read about this says this is a horrible idea. No matter what your politics are, they say this is a fairly horrible idea because the idea of rent caps is counterproductive because it disincentivizes developers from starting new projects because you're capping for a long time. They're capping their net profits.
Now it did say, that there were some other people speaking, and again, I haven't looked it up specifically to see what it is from the administration, but we're seeing different people obviously bring it up as a topic and talk about it, and so they said it wouldn't apply to new construction, it wouldn't apply to this, it wouldn't apply to that.
There's certain renovation things.
Yeah, which makes
there's
sense.
Carve-outs.
But I think so. I sent you the one about Grant Cardone.
Yeah, Cardone was excited. I don't know if it was tongue in cheek, but
it was.
He's like, "Oh, this is going to be great."
It
for
was
me.
Definitely tongue in cheek, in a point where he was kind of playing off the fact that, hey, basically what you're saying is I have a 5% cap, so therefore I could essentially maximize that 5% cap every year on my property.
Yeah, he was basically saying, he was insinuating that some properties he doesn't raise 5, he might raise 3, and he's like, well, I'm just going to go and cap it out. Why would I not? If you're just going to say this is acceptable, then let's just go ahead and go 5. Everyone,
right? Or you might have
5.
a one, even though yeah, I mean, like a 1% increase, right, or something like that. I mean, 5% is is a pretty big number when you think about it, right? I mean, on $1,000, right? That would be, here I go with math, so I'm probably going to sound stupid, but $50, right?
$50.
Yeah. So, it's $50 a year, right? And that's pretty substantial if $50 goes up every single year, and that number is going to increase because it's 5% on the new number, right? So
yeah,
now it's 5% on $1,050 a month, right? Or 2,000. If it's $2,000 a month in rent, which, our average in our area right now is probably 2,000 plus. And so now you're talking, it's $100. So now 2,000 is 2,100. That was kind of his point, which again, I think market would still be a factor, right? Like you're not going to be able to just raise rents to raise rents.
Right.
If the market doesn't support it, people aren't going to pay it. But
I mean, if you're out there, if you're a developer out there, how in the world are you not going to have a wink and a nod of like, we're doing 5%? I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
who's going to be out now? I guess if it's just a competitive, hey, we have to fill this place, we're doing discounts, but I'm sure they can get around. They can still keep the base a certain number, but
Well,
we're going to give you the first month free, and so it kind of amortizes over the first couple of
and
years where it actually comes
who
out
knows what
cheaper. But
who knows what the target is, other than the fact that it obviously is attractive to people that rent, right? People that rent, property. The majority of like workforce community, for instance, that haven't bought a house yet and they rent. The idea of that for them is like, oh, there's some kind of regulation here, right? Because
yeah,
if they do
well,
live in apartments, right? And I've heard this from some friends and family of ours that rent in apartments, and they were upset last year because the rent went up, $250, right? $250, $300. But what it was is you had a new investor that came in and bought the building and basically, went in and repainted everything, did a bunch of CapEx expenditures and did all these things to upgrade the apartments. And obviously as a tenant, you may or may not really understand or benefit from new paint outside or, different things that they may have done to the capital expenditures. It may not apply to you. And so therefore, when you get charged for it, it is frustrating, right? Like when you
yeah.
see your rents going up, on renewal for $250 a month, and you're like, what the heck? I didn't want this. And so it does create, an issue for that tenant when they start getting priced out, right, on an existing place that they live in, and all of a sudden now the rent's gone up, $400 in 2 years. So I can understand.
They'll find ways around it, though.
I can understand the whole reason that it went out from a marketing piece to get a lot of the middle class on board to be like, oh yeah, I please put a rate stop in here, because you've had this happen over the last couple of years, and mind you, the reason rents have gone up is because taxes and insurance have gone up.
And supply is low.
And
supply is
supply
low.
is low.
Housing supply is low.
Demand is high. In areas like what we're in, DFW, I mean, job market's extremely healthy. So
yeah,
it's going to cause more demand, and in that, the rents are going to go up. So,
but there's going to be these big guys that they're going to slow down development because costs are higher. You are having maybe if it's new, they could, but I think the fear in some of these articles is, look, this is the foot in the door. If they're going to start regulating it this way, then they're going to start creeping into, well, what is, how long does it count if it's new? Is it a 5-year window?
Mm-hmm.
But then your numbers are off moving from there. What does a renovation mean? All that sort of thing. I think you're having a report on all sorts of stuff. And I think the other part is it's just another, instead of letting the market figure itself out, because inevitably if you overbuild and then people have to drop the bottom out, like the new builds around here, Lennar, DR Horton, they're throwing crazy incentives like we talk about every week. If they did that in the apartment arena, or very new home buyer, first-time home buyer, super cheap, kind of almost barn dominium type, whatever it takes to get more houses out there, let the market fix it, as opposed to putting regulation on it. And what'll happen is they will have to issue in tax incentives to people, and they'll have to offer rebates, and they'll have to offer, checks, refund checks to people to go to afford things. And so it's just more regulation and more hand in your pocket. And it's just annoying. After a while, it's like, dude, y'all don't have your stuff figured out. And so why are you going to put more regulations on a market that could figure itself out if you just let it go and just let people build if they can build, and I understand there are people in society who need help and a leg up, and you need systems in place for that. But the more hand you put on a huge section of the GDP is housing, the more you grab onto that and say, hey, let's manipulate this and see if this works out. One of the reasons inflation went nuts is because you started handing out thousands of dollars worth of checks over several months, and people just went crazy buying stuff, and then there was inflation in prices because there was way high demand because people had money and there wasn't enough supply, and it ran up, and people just kept the prices there, and I'm not an economist, but it's not rocket science either. And so it is crazy to think, and I think this is a real grab for the blue collar hey, he's fighting for us, and this is kind of this is really going to be helpful. And I guess maybe the silver lining for real estate investors is I don't know that the writing is on the wall that this policy will stay in place for more than about 6 months, because if for whatever reason another party gets in there, I don't, especially with Trump being a real estate investor, I can't imagine that this is one of those things he would just be super cool with. But we'll see. We'll see how it all plays out. But yeah, that was big news this week that Joe Biden wants to cap rents and all sorts of your Grant Cardones and all your celebrity investor people were all over Instagram talking about it. So we'll try to link a few articles there. And if there is any other topic you want us to touch on, if you have something about the investing process you don't understand, terms, anything like that, hey, how does title work? How does the inspector, what kind of inspector should I be looking for? Let us know. We're trying to find some folks there that we can interview to kind of deep dive on those sort of things. I think what we're going to do for the time being, is we're going to kind of keep this format where we do a check-in, we do a market update, and we do some news, and we're not going to have a specific topic that we take on unless it just really pops up that we need to do something. So we're not beholden to a format, but this is last couple of weeks we've done more of the conversational stuff, and I think it's going well. So we will keep that up. If you have not found us yet, go look for us on YouTube and subscribe there so you get updates on whenever we upload things there. Find us on Spotify and Apple, and send a link to a friend. Copy, paste into a text and say, you should listen to these guys. Word of mouth is how we have grown at all. We don't have this huge organic reach. And so people being cool with their friends and saying, hey, I think you would enjoy this. That's really how we've grown. And we very much appreciate any time that you've done that. So until next time, have a great day.